getting ready to move into our final conversation for today, keeping in mind that we are in the Easter season and we need to understand what the true meaning and significance of it is. We have with us at this time Father Matt Ruhl, who is the head of the St. Martin de Porres Parish Church.
So, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. You all right or what?
I am good.
Thank God.
So, Father Matt, let's just start off by talking about what this time of year signifies for Christians.
Okay. Well, it signifies, it is the very heart and soul of all Christianity. Mm-hmm. So what does it signify? Well, it signifies salvation. It signifies God among us. It signifies a willingness, ability to suffer with Christ and to rise with Christ. And there's no end. There's no end to what all this really signifies.
Yeah. Now, we had a conversation with you looking at Lent. And we've had many conversations over the years discussing how people in today's age celebrate, or I should say, how they reflect during this particular time of year. Right. And it is to be a very somber time. Yes. It is to be a time of sacrifice, leading up to what is considered the most significant day in the Christian calendar. Right. From your perspective, how much do you feel that people are still attuned with what Lent and Holy Week and Easter is to represent?
Well, if you look at society, yeah, and you look at the business on the streets, and you look at the corruption, then in some respect you have to say we're not in tune at all. You've just got to say, okay, this is, we're not living really the gospel at all in many respects. Now, of course, many people are, but just by reading the paper and watching the news, you would get the impression, does anybody believe in this anymore? So I would say the biggest problem is that too many people do not take the good news to heart. That's what I would say.
Now, Father Matt, we know you to be you are in the St. Martin's community. We know the challenges that specific neighborhood faces. Many people, while still very connected to their religion and their faith, oftentimes look at our society and say, well, we call ourselves Christians, we call ourselves God-fearing, but it's not really showing.
In many respects, no. As I say, in the media, in the popular culture, you look at all the murders, you look at all the corruption, you look at all the trials on TV for politicians who have been caught doing what they should not be doing, and it could lead the average Belizean to say, man, what a mess. However, you know, Marlene, I look out at my congregation every morning at 6:30, and then every Sunday, of course, and I see a church full of really good people. So I've been blessed by seeing all these good people who really do good things. Mm-hmm. But then you see the message in the culture, the kind of the overwhelming sense of lack of Christianity, and there's definitely a little discrepancy between the people in the pew and what's going on in the newspapers, the television, mm-hmm, et cetera, et cetera. So what do we do about all this? So what do we do? There's the question. And here's the thing. Everybody wants to go to the Keys for Easter and celebrate Easter. I have no problem with that, but it's the same thing with the September celebrations. Everybody wants to celebrate, la-da-da-da-da. Okay, so people are really into celebrating. But the thing that any even semi-conscious observer would note is they don't look at the hard work that preceded the events that caused this celebration. Mm. We could talk about George Price, but we're talking about Easter today. So I just want to say this. People will get caught up in celebrating, but they also get caught up in the resurrection and in the miracles, and they think, woohoo, woohoo. And I'm here to tell you that what people don't pay attention to is all the hard work Jesus did prior to the Passion, prior to his getting arrested. And here's the thing. People will talk about miracles, but what you almost never hear anybody preach about, and what you will almost never hear a teacher talk about, is the genius of Jesus. Now, Jesus wasn't born with all the answers. If you say Jesus came to earth and he knew everything all the time, then you have really misunderstood who Jesus is. And in fact, the Catholic Church would call that a heresy. You can't say that Jesus knew everything as a human being, because then he's not like us. And the whole point of his coming was to be like us. So Jesus studied. I mean, you never hear anybody talk about how hard Jesus had to study to understand who he was, who his people were, and what the appropriate course of action for him was. And some of the things, if you are a student of the scripture, if you're a student of the gospel, and I don't mean you just read it and talk about how it makes you feel. I mean you get down into it and say, okay, this is going on. Then you see the brilliance of so many of Jesus' responses to the scribes and the Pharisees, and you say, God, that is really a brilliant thing to say. Perfect case in point. All the Jews believed, love God, heart, mind, soul. Nobody had any problem with that. But then Jesus takes a little sentence out of the book of Leviticus and throws it next to that and says, love God, heart, mind, soul, but then love your neighbors yourself. Now, you and I have said that and heard that so many times we just take it for granted. But at the time, it was positively genius. It was a genius thing to say. I'm going to build this religion on love of neighbor. And then he goes one step further and expands the definition of neighbor to mean your enemies. Okay, so we'll celebrate. We'll celebrate the resurrection. We celebrate the passion. But are you doing the hard work of loving your neighbor prior to that celebration? And I got to say, too many people are not. Too many people are not. It's just not happening. But Jesus was a student of his scriptures. He studied hard. It was clear he studied them. And he did all the hard work necessary for him to understand who he was. And then it culminates, of course, in the crucifixion and the resurrection. But nobody celebrates the hard work of Jesus in preparation for that moment.
Now, that's such a powerful message, and I think especially reflecting on what we see in our society today, the lesson of loving your enemies or
Correct.
your neighbors is one that is very fundamental and can really, if we were to practice and embrace the message fully, perhaps we wouldn't see some of the things that we see. But what I find most interesting is when we look at, if we were to go back to what takes place at this time in Jesus's life, it's not easy. I mean, we celebrate Easter, but
right.
this is the end of his life, his human life on earth. But it's also filled with lots of challenges.
Yeah.
And not just the crucifixion. One area that I always try to reflect on, and I was thinking about it this morning, was how hard the betrayal was by Judas. And if that's a lesson that we use in today's society, how he was able to recognize that his friend,
right.
his apostle,
right.
would betray him in such a way and accept and forgive.
Correct.
If we were to put that in today, if you were to make it a lesson in today's world, how would you try to translate that?
Well, you are absolutely right. You should be a little theologian. If we're going to love our neighbor, one of the essences of loving your neighbor is forgiveness. Yeah. Period. If we all held grudges, if you all ran around shooting everybody who did us wrong, everybody would be dead. Mm-hmm. Everybody would be dead. Okay, so clearly, forgiveness has to be a part of that. Now, Judas, of course Jesus would forgive Judas, but Judas didn't really understand who Jesus was. Not only does he not accept that forgiveness, he goes and hangs himself out of remorse. Although, I gotta say, if a guy hangs himself out of remorse, we might have some compassion for old Judas. But then, like Jesus' best friend, Peter, says, oh, I'll follow you to your death. And he goes, you what? You're going to deny me 3 times before the cock crows? Get out of here. You're not going to deny, you're not going to. Okay, so, and that was a betrayal. That was a huge betrayal. And then he's at the cross, and there's his mom, and there's John, but he is essentially abandoned. And so he looks at these 3, he's done all this hard work, getting back to our hard work, he's done all this hard work up until the age of 30, around the age 30. And then for 3 years, he's teaching everywhere. And at the cross, he's got to say, Was it all for nothing? Was this all for nothing? And there certainly everybody, at the moment Christ died on the cross, nobody expected a resurrection. And everybody thought, it's all over. The apostles go back fishing, everybody gets back to normal, and then the resurrection happens. But you are absolutely right. The sense of betrayal, the despair, yeah.
That he even fought what was to be his faith.
Yep. Yeah, that was it was a hellish moment. There's no question. It was a hellish moment. Yeah. So, what's the lesson for us? Okay. You and I, we go through our own trials, we go through our own tribulations. We certainly do. But they certainly aren't as great as Christ's. Christ survived and destroyed even death. So in our struggle, we have great faith. But in our struggle, we get to say our struggle becomes our prayer. The anxiety we feel in our chest, the sweaty palms, the shaky knees, the anxious thoughts, whenever that happens to us, we can say, okay, well, this is a little bit what Jesus felt. This is a little bit what Christ felt.
If there were a lesson that Belizeans, that you would want to see Belizeans really take from Easter, from the Passion of Christ to the resurrection, what would you say would be the most relevant lesson that we can learn at this time?
At this point in this nation's history, we worked hard for independence, and certainly we've worked hard to get where we are. But things are if you just read the newspaper, you know that things aren't going so well. Good people got to become better. I'm sure you can go to the gangs and you can take out a big ad and say, quit being gangsters, go back to work, go back to school. That'll never happen. But I can take the good people in my church and I can challenge them to say, okay, you're all good, holy people. We need to be better and we need to be holier because the forces of darkness are getting more powerful. So the lesson today, I think the lesson for me and this Easter is Christ had hard work, we have hard work. Good people got to become better, holy people got to become holier, and we got to fight the forces that are doing everything they can to destroy this country. That's what I would say my lesson is.
And good people becoming better, is it enough to just go to church?
No! If all you do is go to church, then quit going to church. No. Love, St. Ignatius of Loyola said, love is better expressed in deeds than in words. Deeds are what you will be judged on. It's very easy to go to church. I know people will say, oh, I had to get up early and get hair done and I can't cook. I know it can be an inconvenience to go to church. Duh. But just praying isn't enough. If you don't have actions to go with those prayers, if you're not willing to work for the very thing you're praying for, then quit wasting your time praying.
It's a very important call to Christians.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Now, bringing it back to the significance of the Holy Week, we're actually right about to enter into quite a number of very significant events for the church. We have the Chrism Mass coming up.
Correct, Wednesday night?
Yeah. What is the significance of this? Let's go through from now until the resurrection.
Okay, one of the many things that I love about the church is our communion. If you for some reason you had to go do a show in Hong Kong, and I'm taking it you don't speak Mandarin, but if you went to a mass in Hong Kong, you would know what was going on. The unity in the church is a great thing. And so what happens at the Chrism Mass is all the oils that we use for baptisms and anointing of the sick, confirmation, all those oils that are used throughout the year, every church has the oil that was blessed at this Chrism Mass. So it is a sign of our unity as a church through these sacramentals, through these oils. And the oils get sent throughout the country. Every church has a little portion of these oils that are blessed. So it's a symbol and a sign of the church's unity and its service to its people. So that's the Chrism Mass.
And then moving into Holy Thursday.
Holy Thursday, right. So you have the Mass is what's held up as being also a unifying aspect of the church. The Mass is what the absolute pinnacle of our public life as Catholics. You take away the Mass, you take away the church. I've often said in homilies, and this is coming on the heels of my saying, without deeds, prayer is no good, but I will say this. If God said, okay, Matthew, you have 1 hour left on earth, I would not feed the hungry, I would not clothe the naked, I would not visit the sick, I would say Mass. Because in that Mass is what keeps us together. And that Mass is what fortifies those who go out and feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and visit the sick too. So that is an exceptional moment. And it's also the moment of service, because this is when Jesus washes the feet.
Yeah. This is when we commemorate Last Supper.
Correct.
And why is the washing of the feet significant?
Because if Jesus, who is God, washes the feet of his students or his apostles, then that is the lesson to all Christians, that we are here to serve and not be served.
Washing the feet was seen as subservient.
It was a slave's job. It was the job of a slave.
So for the host or their leader,
correct,
to take on the job that would have been of the slave,
correct,
it was very significant, a humbling moment.
It was a humbling moment, but it was, and you think about, okay, Jesus knows he's only got a few hours to live. What's the last lesson he tells these guys? You are servants. That's what you are. If you're going to tell the good news, you have to be servants. We're not in this for glory. We're not in this for honor. We're in this for service.
And then moving into Good Friday.
Oh, well, there's you go. There's what you're talking about, the Passion. This is it. And the Passion, it's we killed God. Here's the problem. People will say, oh, all these kids killing each other. Oh, these politicians are corrupt. Oh, okay. Never forget, human beings are capable of killing God. That's what we did. If we can kill God, we are capable of anything. Yeah. So, we remember it. We respect Christ for going through it. We love Christ for going through it. It is, unfortunately, a terrible reminder of the evil in humanity, but it's also a reminder of the absolute perfect grace in Christ, and that grace is he shares with us.
Now, it's a very solemn day, and in Belize, in fact, it is a holiday. It is also a dry day. There isn't the sale of alcohol that takes place, and in most communities, there are quite a number of superstitions as to what you cannot, and should not do.
Right.
Where do you find these manifest from? Of course, it should be celebrated as a solemn day.
Right.
And it's a day of fasting.
Right. Human beings are great. I just love human beings. You never know where all these things come from. Maybe some kid, maybe 100 years ago, somebody drowned on Good Friday, and so all of a sudden nobody can swim on Good Friday. You never know where all these things come from.
Or you'll turn into a mermaid.
In some, it's a folksy understanding or a folksy expression of their respect for Good Friday.
Yeah.
So I don't have any trouble with it. It does no harm.
Yeah.
And in many respects, it does inspire a sense of the mystery.
But it should be. I mean, I remember growing up as a child. Even being in the Keys, you just watched the water. You couldn't swim in it. But it was also a day that you were not supposed to play too loud. You weren't supposed to play loud music.
Right.
There was no alcohol for the adults, not for the kids. But it was really that was continuously said that it should be as solemn as possible.
Yeah, I mean, one day out of 365. For goodness sakes, slow down and let's be attuned to history and to the mystery. I think it is appropriate to be solemn. I think it is appropriate to be still and be prayerful. No, And it's still a celebration, just because you're not going hoo-ha. It's a solemn celebration. It's like a funeral. A funeral is also a celebration, but it's a solemn celebration. And so that's what Good Friday is. It's a solemn celebration. And Marlene, I will tell you who I feel sorry for. I feel sorry for anybody who has no sense of all this. It breaks my heart that there are those who have no religious turn in their minds or in their hearts, and that all they do is curse the fact that the Chinese shop isn't open so they can't go get a beer. My heart bleeds for those people.
And moving into the resurrection. This is considered the most important day in the Christian calendar.
Right. Correct.
Why is that? Not the death, not the birth, but the resurrection.
Well, because it was the final demonstration that Jesus is God. You have all the miracles, you have all the teaching, you have Jesus trying to beat it over the head of these guys that he is who he is, and nobody really gets it. And it's just, I mean, the fact that everybody went back to work. It was like a Monday. Everybody just went back to work and forgot it. It was just done until, boff, here comes Jesus. And it's, okay, now we've got something here. And without that resurrection, nobody would have written the gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Nobody. There were lots of people like Jesus walking around at the time. Lots of healers, lots of miracle workers. But this one was the one that caused everybody to sit up and say, all right now. And without the resurrection, there's no Christianity. None. Everybody would have forgotten Jesus. Absolutely would have forgotten about him. Yeah.
And how should it be celebrated?
Okay, so fine. How do you celebrate the resurrection? I would say in two ways. Celebrate with your family, for goodness sakes, or with friends. You drink a beer, drink a glass of wine, have a little bourbon, whatever you want, smoke a cigar, whatever. Chocolate. I think, amen, celebrate. But in the midst of that celebration, you have to say, okay, let me reinvigorate my sense of compassion for my fellow human beings. Let me celebrate today and get back to work tomorrow. We just have to do it. I can't beat it home enough. Good people got to pick up the pace. We got to pick up the pace, and we got to know that the resurrected Christ is with us as we pick up our pace. That's the long and the short of it. Celebrate by all means. I'll be celebrating. I'll be so tired, I'll probably go celebrate by going to bed. But you get up on Easter Monday morning and you recommit yourself to service.
And Father Matt, of course, to close off, I just want to give you, I know you work very hard on your homilies to deliver to parishioners around this time, but for those who won't be able to make it to your Mass, what would you want to share as your Easter message to the Belizean people?
Well, I'd say, okay, so from Holy Thursday to the resurrection, it's all really kind of one Mass. It's all one, it's all part and parcel. And I think the first thing I'm going to ask my people is, what do you believe enough in to be willing to die? What are you willing to die for? And if there's nothing in your life for which you are willing to give up your life, you've wasted your life. You've wasted your life. If you have nothing that you would give up your life for, and then understand that this thing for which you are willing to give up your life, God has given you the gift, the grace, the strength, the wisdom to go after it and to serve it, to make what you are willing to die for the center of your life and to live for that thing. Whether it's your children, whether it's the betterment of your nation, whether it's the growth of your church, what is it? What is it that you're willing to die for? And after you've decided you're willing to die for it, go do it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate it. And once again, I think it's most important that we can speak about these celebrations that we all look forward to, but most importantly, how we can learn the lesson to put into practice for everyday life. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
We're going to go ahead and take our final break, and when we come back, we'll have our wrap-up, so stay tuned.